In 2003, the United States began the second longest war in its 240-year history. The invasion of Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom, was designed to be a forceful removal of President Saddam Hussein from power, in line with the speed and rapid-fire deployment that defined the success of Operation Desert Storm. Instead, it became an occupation, plagued by insurgent attacks and relative unease. Operation Iraqi Freedom was notable for the media coverage it received throughout its duration. Not only did the major media networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC cover the operation, but also it was covered by non-traditional media sources like CNN and Al Jazeera. The invasion was one of the first times that Al Jazeera, an Arab news source for the Arab world, would cover such an event with such wide-reaching consequences, as Operation Desert Storm occurred before 1996, when the network was founded. Al Jazeera is one of the widest-reaching media sources from the Arab world and continues to be among the most recognizable voices in Arab media today. As a source from the Arab world covering an invasion by Western forces, Al Jazeera was treated with a sense of wariness as they covered the invasion. The question arose whether an Arab media source like Al Jazeera would cover the operation differently than Western media would. Wait. Before we examine the scholarship evaluation of Al Jazeera's coverage compared to that of Western media, let's specify what we're looking at. First is the time frame. The starting point is 2003, when the first U.S. boots on the ground arrived. The terminal point is 2004, when President Bush declared combat missions to be over. Second, what type of media are we looking at? We are looking at news articles available on major media sources' websites as well as their news reporting. We are avoiding social media because it wasn't widely used then like it is today. We are also ignoring print media, as I am unable to read Arabic and choose not to compare works I read in my native language, English, with works that require translation from Arabic. So the perception of Al Jazeera was pushed by the Bush administration and inaccurate. Scholarship indicates that Al Jazeera didn't cover the invasion any differently than Western media sources. Despite the Bush administration claiming that Al Jazeera was a forum for supporters of Saddam Hussein and the supporters of Osama bin Laden. In the documentary Control Room, Lieutenant Rushing, the U.S. coalition spokesperson, claimed that Al Jazeera was combative and biased towards Saddam Hussein. The Bush administration also complained that Al Jazeera brought on panelists who would intentionally espouse opinions that were highly antagonistic to the United States. These statements are untrue. According to El Ahmad and Fahmy, the Al Jazeera network did not cover the invasion any differently than major media news sources from the West, nor did it have an anti-Western slant. There were differences in the media source, but not in the context that the Bush administration made it out to be. The differences between the Arab news sources and the Western media were primarily between the more opinionated of Western media. While Al Jazeera and CNN use active and normative phrases to communicate ideas, Fox News would rely on more dichotomized relationship ideas. Other differences include that Arabic media was reported to have more graphic descriptions of conflict, while Western sources often sanitized the coverage. And there was a negative tone to the reporting from Arabic media sources, but no more negative than the reporting of conflict from Bosnia or Rwanda by their native news sources. In regards to post-colonial theory, coverage of the invasion fits in with Edward Said's discussion of Orientalism. Said claims that the Orient, which includes the Middle East and therefore Iraq, as being described and defined by the Occident, the West. The Bush administration consistently proclaimed that Al Jazeera was the mouthpiece of the enemies of the United States, specifically Al-Qaeda and the Saddam Hussein regime. Here, Al Jazeera is the representative of the Orient and is having its agency removed by the Occident, represented here by the Bush administration. The Bush administration labeled Al Jazeera as something without receiving the consent of the network. The perception of Al Jazeera was drafted by policymakers in Washington, D.C. and other cities within the West, and not within the Middle East itself. This developed a perception about the network that, according to many individuals who worked with the Al Jazeera network, found to be very untrue, as seen in the documentary Control Room. In certain cases, the West engaged in even more direct acts of defining the Orient. For example, the Control Room documentary describes the way that the U.S. constructed the toppling of the Saddam Hussein statue in Baghdad. The members of the staff describe, in a variety of ways, why they are certain that the action was staged, including a lack of women and children on the street, the incorrect accents of the men by the street, the absence of Republican Guard and Iraqi army officials, and the surprising ease in procuring certain materials like flags needed to make the protest and resulting action more media-worthy. Here, the Occident has literally scripted an action that would define a moment in the history of the Orient. We have examined the perception that Al Jazeera was the mouthpiece for the enemies of America and not a reputable or fair media source for the coverage of the Iraq War. Instead, we have found that they were quite fair and differed only from the media sources with more politically extreme views. We have examined how media coverage of the Iraq War fits in with Sayyidi discourse of Orientalism, and specifically on how the Occident often spoke for and created the perception and identity of the Orient. We have also examined how that is played out in the invasion. So, Mr. President, how did I do? Thanks, George. Have a good day, everybody.